In this week's video, we're going to be earning some coin with a tiny coin block. Hey everybody, it's Adrian from Zen's Toys. I'm here in my workshop, which currently looks like a Robert Ryman painting, but it's just because I've moved everything to one end so I could paint with some good mold-killing primer, just kind of seal all the wood and make it a nicer place to spend time in. But it's not going to be blank white walls forever. While I was moving things around to get ready to paint, I came across a bunch of these. And what are these? So these were a project I did actually 3 years ago around this time of year to have sort of a quick print, small gift I could make a lot of and give out. So what they are is it's a little kit. So if I open up this bag, we'll see we get two things. We get a little instruction manual and we get this. So I'll put that's a better way to see it. So it's a tiny, tiny, tiny little flat print kit that gives you a coin block that the kind of thing that you might see in a certain beloved franchise of video games. So what you end up with, once you put it together, is this tiny, 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 tiny little block. And if you push up from the bottom, a coin emerges. So let's talk about how I made it.
So I made this with a combination of FreeCAD and OpenSCAD. I definitely could have used OpenSCAD for everything, but this was a couple years ago. At the time, I was a little more familiar with OpenSCAD than I was with FreeCAD, so I leaned on OpenSCAD a little more than I would if I were to redo this project today. Let's look at what I did do in OpenSCAD. So there's only really two parts. There's this part, which forms the sides of the cube, and then there's a slightly different part that forms the top. There's also two parts that go into the coin, which I did totally in OpenSCAD. So the FreeCAD work was pretty straightforward. There's just a sketch. We have a square that has complementary chunks taken out and added to the left and right sides. So on the left side we have some notches, and on the right side we have some pegs, and those can combine with each other to go around so that 4 of those gives us a rectangular prism box. And then since we want this particular box to be open on the bottom but have a closed top, we have some notches that are along the top to accept the top part of the box. So pretty straightforward, just had that out. And then there was one other part that had to be made, and that was the top. So this is pretty similar as well. We just have a square basically with the appropriate dimension. And then we have 4 pegs on all 4 sides. You'll notice that there is no hole here. I added that in OpenSCAD. Again, this is 3 years ago, and I'm much more of a FreeCAD convert at this point. Anyway, that was pretty much it. So the one other thing I did do, and I'll show you how it all came together in a minute, is I also made in FreeCAD the outer ring of the card. The actual struts I ended up adding in OpenSCAD. The exterior ring was made in FreeCAD as well. So that gave me 3 parts to export: the top face, the outer ring, and the sides. So here I had the top exported from FreeCAD, and I needed to put a slot through it so that the coin could actually come out of the top. So the way I did that was just to import the top, and then I made another cube that went through it with the appropriate dimensions, and then I just used a Boolean operation to cut one from the other. While I was at it in OpenSCAD, I also made sure that everything fit together. So I made this module sides that what it does is it just imports the side 4 times, but rotates it and scales it to flip it and etc. Does some transformations to get it in the right position and orientation so I could check to make sure that everything looked reasonable. To make the actual coin, I actually did all of that in OpenSCAD directly. So it had 2 parts. It has the coin and the base for the coin. And for the coin, what I did is I started with just a cube to be the central post, and then I just added a cylinder. And I actually kind of benefited by OpenSCAD having a default of a very chunky cylinder, in that having a pretty chunky cylinder that's stretched a little bit does a pretty good job, I thought, of making like an 8-bit video game coin. So that was the coin. Then I needed the bottom piece to the coin slots in to provide a base. And for that, I started with just a cube that had the right dimensions. So basically the interior of the larger cube with a little bit of clearance. And then I added another cube at basically the same size as the central post of the coin. And then that allowed me to use a Boolean operation to cut out a hole. And putting that together gave me the parts of the coin. Now it was time to actually put everything together into a single printable flat pack card. So first off, I started by getting the sides imported. So I just brought in a copy of the side.stl and I just started laying it out with some translates. Okay, so now I had my four sides laid out, and I needed to add a few more. So I added in the top with slot, and then I added in the two parts for the coin and the coin support. Now at this point I had something that was laid out nicely, but obviously this wouldn't be printable. Well, it'd be printable, but it wouldn't be a single piece that I could hand to somebody. To start fixing that, I first imported my outer edge, which I made in FreeCAD, and then I needed to connect everything up. So this would be a nice single piece. So for that, I needed to add a lot of struts. And what that ended up meaning is just a lot of cubes. So here's my struts module, and you can see it's basically just a lot of cubes. It was annoying to do, but it's pretty simple. I just make a cube, translate it, make a cube, translate it, make a cube, translate it. I'm also, as I'm looking at this for the first time in 3 years, I'm realizing that none of these numbers are parameterized, which is a little embarrassing. So don't do that in your own OpenSCAD. So if I just uncomment the struts, you'll see that I've got all the struts that I need. So that was pretty much it. I could have been a lot smarter about where the struts connect to the pieces. This was my first time doing a flat pack print. Definitely something I'd like to do more of in the future, and I think if I do, I'll be a lot smarter about it. That's how it goes, live and learn. So since I was going to be giving these away, I wanted to make sure that each print came with a little instructional booklet to show people how to put the block together. The first step in making that was to render out each of the STLs in Blender with a line drawing style. And once I had all of that, I was almost done, but I also realized I needed a couple of extra components. I needed to indicate the tools that you'll need, in this case super glue and an X-Acto knife or similar. And I also wanted something to have kind of a fun title. So for that, I just broke out a sketchbook and drew some stuff in pencil and went over it in pen to give me a nice black and white super glue tube, X-Acto knife, and some components to use in the front of the booklet. And once I had all the 2D parts I needed, it was just a matter of laying things out. I made a document that was just the right size for a page and just laid everything out in Krita. So I had the cover, page 1, page 2, page 3, and then a page for the final assembly. And that gave me all of the pages. So I wanted to keep the pages separate for ease of editing, but once I had each page, then I could lay out the pages. So I got the individual parts, used those to lay out each page, and then used the individual pages to lay out the booklet. And once I had the strip, I filled a 8.5 by 11 sheet with it to get 4 per page. And I was ready to print them out, cut them up, and accordion pleat fold them to give me a nice little booklet.
So now let's look at how one of these goes together. So first off, you take the packet, open it up, get the instructions and all the parts. And the first thing to do is to clip all the parts out. So I used some wire snips, which are kind of ideal. If anything, you want to err on the side of getting a little extra plastic off rather than leaving any sprue, because the sprue's gonna make things not fit together if there's any left over. Once you've done all of that and clipped everything out, maybe using a little bit of a file might help. Once all the pieces are ready, then it's time to assemble. To assemble, bear in mind, this is gonna be kind of annoying, and it's very, very fiddly. But I found that generally what works best is to carefully put together the 4 walls, and then put that down on the table and press the top on. And once that's all assembled, putting a couple little drops of super glue at the corners and let it just kind of wick in via capillary action will lead to something that's pretty robust and strong. The actual coin assembly itself goes together much more easily, and you just want a tiniest bit of super glue in the slot, and then just push it in, and that's all you need to do. Once all the super glue is set, you can use a Sharpie maybe to add a little bit of detailing. And your coin block is done. Yeah, so there we have it. We have a little tiny coin block. And to be honest, this isn't the best executed project. There's a lot I would change about this if I went back. I think the idea is solid, but it's really just too hard to put together. That makes it not that much fun. So I think I still might revisit this, and I think the key thing where I went wrong is making this too small. It being a 12mm cube is just way too tiny. And I could have made it quite a bit bigger and still had a pretty small card to print out that still would have printed pretty quick and would have made it a lot easier to assemble. Also, I think making the walls a little bit thicker as well. So I think the overall cube could be a little bit bigger and the walls could be a little bit thicker. And what that would do is it would let these pieces snap together a lot more easily. So that's something I might do. I think it'd be fun to kind of revisit this and make a series of cards that can be printed out and made into blocks for different types of things you might see in an 8-bit or 16-bit sort of platformer game. But we'll see. But hopefully it was still interesting to see how the different components went together and how there was a blend of FreeCAD, OpenSCAD, and a little bit of drawing even to make this come together. It is harder than it should be to put together, but if you want the files, you're more than welcome to them. I'll have a link down below to both the STLs and the instruction booklet if you want that. So that's about it for this week. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.